All right, true crime fans, I'm your host, Tim Solberg, and we are going to start our live stream. I don't know quite how long the delay is. I think we've got it set for 20 seconds, so we started a little bit early just so we could be on time. So if you're not early, you're not on time. But I figure we'll spend just about an hour today going over some of the current cases that we've got going on in the world and really start out in looking at Tiffany Gomas, then talking a little bit about Rachel Morin, transitioning over to Brian Koehberger. I also want to hit on Henry Dinkins for a moment, and then maybe a little bit of Richard Allen. So figure about 10 to 15 minutes for each one. If you're in the live stream, would love to get some of the questions and perspective. Before we jump into any of these cases, though, I do want to highlight some of the comments that came through on my previous videos. A lot of great perspectives. I think I responded to all of them. I definitely liked and made sure that I was interacting with most of the comments that were out there. I don't always agree with every comment, but what I do agree with is different perspectives. It does kind of open up those creative juices to kind of understand, like, you know, what are other people thinking? And sometimes people nail it right on the head. And we're going to see that in some of the comments. So first things first, I kind of want to do some recognition. So we'll start with Marnie Ann, who commented on a video about 3 weeks ago. And then she followed up today just asking me if, you know, I watched the updated information on Brian Koehberger, the stuff around the DNA, and then even expediting his trial, which essentially wasn't expediting, but they're going to get it going as quickly as possible. We'll talk a little bit about that today. I thought was really good. And then if we come back out here, a lot of comments on the Tiffany Gomas video. This is the most interesting, and that's why we want to start with this one first, just because some of the perspectives out there were pretty awesome. Some I didn't think of. Others we did talk through with some of my friends. Even right before the stream, I was talking to one of my friends about it and kind of giving him an update of, you know, what some of the comments were. And he was going to go look at them after. But there was a lot of great comments in here, and there's a lot of people to really highlight throughout here that I want to say thank you for just making those comments and really helping out the videos, right? So this is pretty cool stuff. I will say that the one that's really kind of sat out in my mind the most is the ones that are really looking to identify what was Tiffany looking at, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in depth. But there were so many different perspectives that it made me stop and think and then kind of sleep on it a little bit and try to figure out, you know, was it something that was alien related? Was it something that was drug induced? Was it something that was mental illness? Was it, you know, alcohol induced? And then what happened after the flight? What happened pre-flight? We're seeing more videos now where she actually assaulted a gentleman, and people in the comments were pretty spot on when they said, you know, she was never arrested for anything or charged for anything, at least up until this moment. So is that something that's going to be happening later on? Another piece that I thought was very interesting was that, you know, a lot of people don't believe that it was her in the apology video. And we're going to talk about that in a moment too. But I definitely wanted to highlight the folks that were spending time in the comments trying to encourage other folks to give their perspective. That's what we want on our channel for sure. We want to make sure that we can look at all the different perspectives. Look, we're all fans of true crime. We love listening to different types of perspectives. We love listening to different opinions. And sometimes you just kind of hit the nail on the head. And we've seen that, right? One that I've really got to highlight is with Rachel Morin. If I go in here, you know, early on, if you look at like Daniel Kelly here, you know, said that it's probably a random attack or possibly ex-husband. And what did we find out? We found out that it's possibly a random attack. We're not going to say it is for sure, but we're probably 90% sure that Richard Tobin had nothing to do with it. But we're going to talk about that as well, right? So let's jump into it. I want to make sure that I say thanks for everybody that viewed the last video that I put up, or the last two videos that I put up. It's been almost 6 months since we broke 1,000, so I really do appreciate that. And this video is still going. If we look at the analytics, we're still seeing a lot of views right now, so I do appreciate that. And I think next week we're going to focus in on the wildfires that are happening or that have happened in Maui, and then some of the wildfires in Canada. So look forward to those. We're going to tie back some of the crime things, or what could potentially be crimes, and talk through some of the conspiracies. So without further ado, we are going to start talking about Tiffany Gomas. So let me give you a little bit of a brief synopsis. We're going to talk through this gentleman right here. We'll watch the video together as well. And then I kind of want to give you just a little bit of what happened in the comments after I posted this video. So we all know Tiffany Gomas as the crazy plane lady, right? Or some would argue that Tiffany Gomas is not the crazy plane lady, depending on where your stance is on that. But for all intents purposes for today, we're going to say that Tiffany Gomas is the crazy plane lady. Okay. In the video that I shared with you, you did see kind of what happened pre her walking down that flight and becoming viral. Something had freaked her out, whatever that might be. In the comments, we have heard that there was different things that possibly could have happened. One, maybe the guy in the green hoodie, quote unquote, was an alien. So that did come up. We have seen that on other news as well. I also, one of the friends that I'm in contact with a lot, had mentioned that he felt like it was AI. For a couple of different reasons. One, he didn't feel that the voice matched up when you look at the apology video to the video where she walks down the aisle. The face we saw in some of the comments where the bone structure wasn't matching up from video to video. And then other comments were, it very much so was real. And then she's making the best out of the worst situation that could have possibly happened to her. I talk a little bit about, and it's more of a saying than anything, where, there's no such thing as bad publicity. I got called out on that, and that's fine, not a big deal. That is an old saying that goes way back, something that I learned in marketing as well. But there is such thing as bad publicity for sure. But you have to weigh it, because, I kind of responded to that as well. The only thing worse about being talked about in a negative light is not being talked about at all. And maybe she took that approach, right? And we know Tiffany Gomas, she's been a marketing executive for 15 plus years. Now she owns her own company. And, was it a big marketing ploy? It could have been. Was there more to it? Yes, there definitely could have been. There's a lot of unanswered stuff that's going on right now. And in the comments, I felt like the community responded very well, right? Gave a couple of different perspectives, but ultimately what everybody was, or the common denominator for everybody and their thoughts, really came down to there's no other explanation other than her apologizing for some swear words and some profanity, right? And she highlights that there was kids on board, and that, they're probably wondering, WTF, what's going on, right? And it's probably something that they're not going to forget. And she really apologizes for that, but she does not go into detail as to what happened. So, there might be a couple of different reasons for that. One, maybe she's embarrassed, right? Maybe she doesn't want to talk about it. Maybe it was drug-induced. Maybe it was alcohol-induced. Maybe it was, just a momentary lapse in judgment, whatever it might have been. Right? Two, maybe there was something there and she saw something and she just can't explain it, or, for whatever reason, she doesn't want to talk about it, right? There's another thing. Three, maybe she wasn't there at all, and maybe it was AI, maybe it was artificial intelligence, or maybe it was staged. One of the things I talk about in my video, I try to leave that open for you folks to be able to give feedback on, is if you look at the camera work, and I fully understand iPhones do typically record very well. So do Samsung phones and some of the other models that are out there. It just looked, that viral piece looked very staged. The way that she walks down, she goes out of the frame, stops, and then there's that dramatic pause like you would see in the movies. And then she slightly comes back into the frame. And then the way that she speaks, there's some pauses in there as well. And then she points out that motherfucker in the back, right? Or that motherfucker ain't real. So either way, when I'm looking at that, and I went through film school a long time ago, I don't want to give my age away, but it was a long, long time ago. Those were things that we were taught, but with video cameras, on how to pan and then have that dramatic exit and then come back in, and then how to articulate those things to make it even more dramatic, right? And I'm sure that I have some folks that are tuning in tonight, or even that have subscribed, that know a little bit more about drama than I do, and I would love to hear from you folks, just to hear, what are some of the things that are going on, right? So those are kind of the three things. You also see in the video that I talk a little bit about what happens when she's in the airport. We don't go into much detail on that, but we do see the video where she's still talking to the American Airlines agent as well as the police, and she's on her way out, but she does stop and say, hey, that plane is never going to make it to Orlando, right? So some of the theories of her AirPods were stolen or whatever the case was doesn't make a lot of sense to me, just because, if her AirPods were stolen, how would that divert an entire plane? So there was something deeper in that, or there was some intent that was a little bit deeper in that she was intending to say, but she just never came out and said it. Again, comments on my video where, nobody could stay in character that long. I do agree with that. That's a long time to be in character. It would have had to have been well planned out. But what do we really know about what happened in the airport, right? We do know that was body cam footage, and the Washington Post was able to get that body cam footage. But at the end of the day, was it something where she was still in character? We don't really know what happens in between. We do see some pictures, and you'll see it on here, where it looks like she has a bloody nose. Not quite sure where that happened. But until she kind of gives us a play-by-play, we just don't know what's going on with Tiffany Gomas, other than she's the crazy plane lady, right? And I hate to say it, I want to assume good intent, right? That's just something that we want to do as humans, and good humans assume good intent. But this one, for me, is just a lot of stuff just is not making sense, right? And this one popped up where, if you look on the screen right now, this gentleman starts talking about an assault, and I'm going to play that video for you right now, and I want you to kind of think through what's really going on here, and then we'll come back to that. So we'll watch this together here real quick.
Okay. So I was just sitting right here, and she just come in.
Did she say anything before that to you? No?
No.
And you didn't say anything to her?
No.
Are you okay? You hurt?
Yeah. No, I'm okay.
You sure?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I held my flight, so it's just going to be in the next 15 or 20 minutes.
Okay.
So that assault mean, what does that mean?
Assault? It means to attack, to fight somebody, to push them, hurt them, right? To bring some kind of harm, bodily injury.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, she just pushed me.
All right, so we'll stop it there. There's only a couple of seconds left, but you hear the police officer talk about assault, what assault is. That'd be simple assault for you folks that are watching. And he had the right to press charges at that point. I don't think he did. The police also have the right to press the charges at that point, and for whatever reason, they didn't either. And I think that that's leaving more questions unanswered than questions being answered. Now, don't get me wrong. Right? If somebody's freaked out and they push you out of the way and they don't mean or intend harm towards you specifically, and he's got no injuries, as he stated himself, and it really didn't hurt other than maybe freak him out, I'm with him. I'm with the police on that one. That's, I would definitely let that go. And other people may not. And it would be up to the person that was pushed to decide if they wanted to press charges or not. For me, I've had much worse things happen, especially growing up in a small town, that that probably wouldn't even make me think twice at that point. I would just know that she was in distress and I would get out of the way. But, the police also have the opportunity to do that as well. And when you see this in a series of a lot of videos, then you start to wonder, is there something more going on? And I think that's what is leaving us with a lot of the unanswered questions, right? If we go down, so you'll see here, this is obviously the infamous image right as she turns around, and it's pretty crazy because when she points it out, everybody turns and looks, so there's that dramatic pause again, right? And that's kind of what throws me off a little bit. But right here, if you look, it looks like she has a bloody nose, and I could be wrong, and it looks like that she's carrying some sort of napkin or Kleenex right there, right? And for me, it seems like maybe she had bumped into something, because she was freaking out pretty good if you watch the video that I had pre viral video. she wanted off that plane, and they were taxiing, they were coming back, right? So, did she bump her head into something? Did something happen? We're not really hearing anything about that. And to be fair, the crazy thing is, up until this point, we haven't heard anything from any other passengers that were on that plane or anything of substance, right? And we also really haven't heard from American Airlines. Like, we're hearing a few things, but, she essentially fell off the face of the earth for 30 days. Right? Which is pretty crazy. Then you have the video, and I didn't play this in my video, but this is basically when she's talking to the police officers outside after they escort her out from the terminal. And the video I chose to play was the one where she was at in the terminal, because, that's the one where she's still convinced that something's going to happen to that flight. And I say that because the rumors that were out there, and this didn't come from her, right? Well, it kind of did, because if you watch the video, she does talk about AirPods, essentially. We're thinking that maybe her AirPods got stolen or whatever the case is. The other crazy thing is, you would think whoever she was talking about would know that they were talking about them, and they would come out, and they would probably be on every news station for the next month as well, right? Especially how this went viral. But again, I could be wrong. I would love to hear your thoughts on what you think about this whole situation right now. And if you watched my video, you did see, her background in marketing. Just because her background's in marketing doesn't mean bad things can't happen. And it doesn't mean that, maybe this was a very real thing and something had happened and triggered her and whatever, and she's making the best out of it. I just think that a lot of the stuff is lining up, and the way that she relaunched social medias, right? So like Twitter, she had 100,000 followers in 4 days, right? You see her Instagram, that's going up. Her LinkedIn, not moving as fast, but I think she was at 3,000 already. So some of those social medias were flying, right? And that's a good way to, rebrand yourself. And, even though it's a viral video and it probably wasn't shining the best light or the best moment of that individual, people know who they are now, plain and simple. So what she does with that in the future is going to rest solely on her. But again, if you go to the New York Post, like I said, on my videos, I'm not monetized, so I can use this stuff. But if you want to see the videos in full length, go to the New York Post and you'll see some of this stuff. Okay. So the last thing I'm going to hit is just, the apology video that we hear from Tiffany Gomas. And, again, great that she comes out with an apology. I think it was very well thought out, very well planned. I do love how they kind of, put it on a phone. Being a marketing executive, she would definitely have access to high quality equipment. And in this case, it does look like they used high quality equipment, right? And then they either trimmed it down in After Effects, or they were actually just using a phone. Either way, it just makes it look more personable for her. And you could tell that she's kind of struggling through it, but it does look like she definitely has a script. For anybody, again, that follows me, if you're in drama, I would love to hear what your perspective is and what you think from all of this, right? But I'm going to stop there. I do want to ask you folks if there's anything more that you want to cover on Tiffany Gomas as the story unfolds. I'll definitely do some updates. I do appreciate everybody watching that video. We have an opportunity to get over 2,000 and maybe even get to 3,000, right? We're looking to continue to grow the channel, but this one was pretty interesting, and we're going to see where that goes. All right, Rachel. Okay, so this one, interesting. I just got to say, I feel bad for her 5 kids, number one. Her kids woke up one morning, and by the end of the day, or essentially the very next day, they were all living with their fathers, right? And not for good reason. This one was pretty scary, right? She was on the Ma and Pa Trail in Maryland. It is a pretty frequented trail, so to have something happen during daylight, because it was 6 p.m., or at least it's anticipated it was 6 p.m., that's pretty crazy. That's pretty brazen, right? And we've seen through the investigation so far that police are asking for help of anybody that was on the trail, and they have found some folks that they want to talk to, and that did come forward, and we don't know what that conversation looks like because, as stated, if you look at the police report and you look at the media, or the media launch that they did, or the media update, they go ahead and they say they're not going to release a lot of information to the public unless they need to find that suspect that they have currently, right? Or that they're looking for. Sorry, they don't have them in custody, but that they're looking for. Any other information could hurt their case when they go to trial, right? And we saw that with Richard Allen and the Delphi murders. We saw that with Brian Koehberger and the Idaho 4. As a matter of fact, we're still seeing that play out, and we'll talk about that case next. But it's crazy because they did find DNA, and they do have a suspect right now, currently, right? And they don't know who that suspect is, but if you look, and I'm sure everybody's seen this, but we'll watch it kind of together anyways. So if you look at this person right here, right? That's the video of them leaving a home invasion, essentially. And that video right there is what police officers are looking for right now, okay? They're looking for assistance. And somebody on my video, had mentioned that, and we're going to go back because I'm going to show you, because we did already give them some recognition. But if you look at Daniel Kelly, right, and then look at this right here, oh, is that the one? Well, basically they're saying, hey, could it have been somebody that, was a migrant or was, going in between cities? We do know that that's a large geographical area that needs to be covered, right, to find this one individual. The good news is they have DNA, but since they haven't released a name of who they're looking for, I would imagine that DNA is not in the database, and the only thing we can go off of right now is essentially the back of this gentleman. Now, I would say, based off of what you're seeing here, because it was a home invasion, is what they're saying, is did the homeowner, or whoever's in the house right there, because you see them close the door, did they get a good look at the face where they could, reconstruct that with a drawing artist and get that out to the public? That would be a really good question, and then that way, they might narrow that down. They are going to look at videos, obviously, and just like they did in the Idaho 4, they'll continue to expand the radius of that based off of what they find, right? And they're going to start with Ring doorbells, then they're going to go to store surveillance and traffic surveillance, and then they'll basically go from where she was murdered and kind of, go all the way out. They'll look for which cars were coming in, which cars left, and then who was in town that doesn't necessarily belong there. The other scenario is maybe whoever did that home invasion in Los Angeles was actually from Maryland and ended up going home, because that is a possibility, right? So that's pretty crazy. What I will hit on is it looked like it was a random attack from the get-go. However, I'm going to state this again, and you might think I'm crazy for this one. I still think that Richard Tobin, being the current boyfriend, should be vetted and should be constantly vetted. And I know that the police have already talked to him, and he's probably not even a person of interest right now, but I think the conversation still has to be had consistently of, where were you at? Or is there anybody that you've ever ran across in your life that could tie back to this, right? Because we know he's been in some trouble, and maybe he's crossed paths with this person that did the home invasion. Now, I'm not saying Richard Tobin had anything to do with it from a perspective that he hired anybody or anything like that. I'm just saying, was it somebody that maybe he crossed paths with, and maybe it was somebody that Rachel knew in passing, and maybe that's how they ran up on her, right? Don't know that for sure, but those are things that I would be asking. But at this point, I wouldn't think that Richard Tobin was directly involved or was involved in a way that was intended to harm Rachel. I think, if anything, you just got to rule out the possibility of something that's indirect, or somebody that he knew, or an acquaintance of some sort, or maybe he ran into somebody. And it might be as simple as that. Now, look, it could also be as simple as, she stopped at a gas station, got some water before she went on her hike, and whoever this person is saw her and followed her there, right? Could be as simple as somebody was already on the trail and was looking for their victim, and she was just randomly chosen, right? Which that's what it looks like right now. But I think we're going to find out that this person, it'll be interesting. I think we're gonna find out that she was more followed than anything, and I'm curious to see what happens, and I do hope that they find them. There's 5 kids out there right now without their mothers, and there's a grieving boyfriend that's out there. But let's be honest, even the volatile relationships that she may have had with her ex-husbands or one ex-husband, as stated, they're going to be grieving as well, right? That's somebody that they knew. And then her friends, her family. And look, everybody that lives in that area in Maryland's got to be freaked out right now, especially since there's not a lot of information. So that's pretty crazy. And I want to hear from you folks. Like, what do you think is going on? I love listening to the perspectives, but if they don't have a DNA match at this point, how are they going to find this person, right? Is it going to be from radius and looking at, all of that kind of stuff? I don't know. Pretty interesting. This one was a sad one. We'll do an update when we get an opportunity, but just to read off from where it is right here, the Hartford County Sheriff's Office is requesting assistance in identifying the below depicted individual in relation to the homicide of Rachel Hannah Morin, which occurred on August 5th, 2023. Rachel was brutally murdered while walking on the Ma and Pa Trail in Bel Air, Hartford County, Maryland. The unknown male is described as being approximately 5'9", 160 pounds, approximately 20 to 30 years of age, dark hair, muscular build, and is believed to be of Hispanic descent. This is not a current photo within the last 6 months, and the subject's hairstyle may have changed. You also got to think they may have facial hair at this point as well. This individual is believed to have ties to the Los Angeles area and may have been involved in violent crimes in other states. And that's what they're really banking on, is that other states may have seen him at some point. So just something to look for. I'll be curious to see what happens here, but this definitely a tragedy. Somebody going out for a walk. I walk my dogs every night. And it's crazy to think, like, just going out for a walk and just never coming home. And then where they found her, right, is pretty crazy, essentially in the culverts. And then the manner of death, we've heard, has been pretty gruesome. And that hasn't been confirmed by the police other than violently attacked. But you do hear one of the locals basically come out and say, he saw that she was found naked and she had looked like she had been beat with a rock or a hammer. So, a lot of stuff going on right there. So that one's pretty crazy. And I hope we find a lot of stuff that goes on with that. But I think we're going to find that whoever it was may have just started stalking her in a few minutes, might have saw her at a gas station, and just saw that there was opportunity. A lot like, Mallory in Iowa? Might be a lot like that. So just something to think about. Next one, Brian Koehberger. So this one was interesting. We're not going to watch 5 minutes, but let's watch the intro of Brian Koehberger here. Pretty crazy, right? He's coming into the courthouse. They're talking a lot about DNA, and we're going to talk through that here in just a moment. And then the judge knows that in Idaho, he, aka being Brian Koehberger, is awarded a speedy trial.
We are now on the record.
I'm going to stop it right there. So, working through this, and I'm going to pull this up on the screen. I'm going to read a couple of things on here, but I want to hear from you before we go into this, right? I thought the DNA piece, and I kind of talk about it in my video, but not at length. I think the DNA piece is kind of made out of a glass house. And what I mean by that is, I just don't know if that's going to be smoking gun enough just because of the way that the DNA was obtained. And I know the judge, right, hasn't thrown it out, but what is this going to look like in court? And what is the jury going to look at, right? Like, what does a normal person look at when they're thinking about DNA? They don't understand DNA very well, but, you're trying to convince somebody that, where was the DNA found and how did they obtain Koehberger's DNA? And then you've got Dylan, who's, essentially terrified, which I would be too, right? And is that going to play a factor, right? Because most criminals would want to drag this out 2 or 3 years, so that way when somebody that, essentially saw the murderer could go to court and might have forgot a lot of what they saw because it's been 2 or 3 years. And it's a very traumatic event that essentially Dylan's got to remember, right? Seeing the murderer leave the house that day. So what's the defense going to really cover here? Are they going to say like maybe it was somebody else, maybe it was a partier that was leaving, and maybe she got her times wrong? Maybe she didn't hear what she thought, or maybe she didn't see a violent criminal leaving. I don't know what they're going to do, but if I was a defense attorney, which I'm clearly not, I would want to be attacking some of the things like DNA evidence as well too, right? Because that DNA evidence is going to put doubt into the jury's mind if they don't get to hear the full thoughts on that. And on cross-examination, anybody that is going to essentially testify, that's going to be a hard thing to do, because the defense is going to try to rip apart the credibility. They're going to make them try to relive what's going on. So is this all part of Koehberger's scheme? And is this part of the plan for Koehberger? If he speeds everything up, maybe the prosecution's not going to be prepared? Or do you think that maybe he's trying to speed it up because he wants Dylan to remember what was going on in there, so that way they could try to, put her down a path when she talks of, was it somebody else that she could have seen, right? Is that the strategy behind it? And then they introduce the DNA after that. I don't quite know what it is, but there's a lot going on in this case that's not making a lot of sense right now. And like I stated before, if you look at some of my live streams and you even look at a couple of the videos, the arrest affidavit only has 17 or 18 pieces of evidence in there, and the police say they have 140. So, we're only seeing a little bit. So what is that going to look like when they're actually in court and you start seeing some more of this evidence come out? Are we just seeing a few things in what we're seeing from the media, and maybe we're scared that he's going to get off, or whatever the case might be, based off of those 17 pieces of evidence? Or once the prosecution lays out their case, because they don't have to go over everything that the police found, are they going to have enough to create a timeline and to remove all reasonable doubt in a jury? The other question I have for you, okay, which I think is pretty crazy, and we're going to talk about this in the next case, is does Brian Koehberger play the card of giving over his trial to the judge? Okay, removing the jury from it altogether. Okay, so Henry Dinkins is doing that right now, and I was trying to figure out why would you do that. And a lot of times that people would turn over their trial to a judge for the judge to decide would be to, go through a lot of technical things, aka DNA, right? Cell phone towers, things that a jury just might not quite understand in an open trial, that a judge might be able to understand, and keep it partial. That is the key factor there. Not that a judge understands technology better than people, not that a judge understands DNA better than people, but what a judge does understand when you're going through all that technical stuff, that you need to stay partial based off of what both sides are saying. And that seems to be something that Koehberger could end up going for, okay? There's other things we've seen with Brian Koehberger, right? Like we've seen that there's rumors out there that possibly he's done this before, and we know that in Pennsylvania they're looking for other crimes that he possibly could have committed. Experts have weighed in and said that for somebody to go in and kill 4 people like that, they essentially believe that something had to have happened before that. There had to have been a dry run. Maybe it was a person. I doubt it would be animals at that point, but other crimes had to have been committed before this one was committed, just based off execution. Now, is that right or wrong? I don't know. I'm not a profiler, but you do hear that. I think the most recent one that I saw was on News Nation with Tracy Walder that was kind of talking about it. I don't think she was firm on that, but she was saying that there is some possibilities of that. And I thought, obviously her working for the FBI would know more about it than I would, but that kind of left in my mind, maybe he is smarter than what he leads on. But I'm curious. The last thing I think about Koehberger with trying to expedite the case is, maybe he's trying to get a plea deal, and maybe that's why they're doing it. They're trying to get the prosecution to scramble a little bit and see if they'll take the death penalty off the table. That is a very real possibility as well. I don't know. And I can only base it off mannerisms that you see Koehberger when he's come into court and he sits down. I mean, he's very respectful when he's speaking to the judge. other than that, we haven't heard a whole lot from him. You just kind of see some of the smirks and the smiles. So that would lead me to believe that he's got a big ego and he thinks he's smarter than everybody. But that's just based off of seeing a few snippets of him, being walked out or him being in court. I don't know his personality at all, and I could be way off base on that, and you can never really judge a book by its cover, right? So there's a lot of things that are going on with this that seem that are very subtle that could end up playing a factor. So, pretty crazy stuff. I will read this out here real quick, but the trial for the man charged with murdering 4 University of Idaho students will maintain its sprint to a scheduled start in 6 weeks. The judge in the case on Friday denied a motion by Brian Koehberger's defense team to pause proceedings over their outstanding questions about this grand jury indictment. Which is pretty interesting because you're going to see some DNA stuff in there, but that's okay. Judge John Judge of Idaho 2nd Judicial District set a breakneck pace to hit the October 2nd trial date, telling the prosecution and public defenders for Koehberger that they'll need to be finished with the discovery process in 2 weeks. Name the experts they plan to have testify a week after that and identify all of their witnesses by the middle of next month. All motions have to be filed by September 22nd in time for jury selection starting September 25th. I know Mr. Koehberger is anxious to have his speedy trial, and he's entitled to that. So I'm going to tell you, this is a little bit of a reality check, the judge said. I'm not even promising it's doable, but that's just what we have to do, so here we are, right? So some crazy stuff going on right there. Under Idaho law, a criminal defendant must receive a trial within 6 months of arraignment. A grand jury sat by the prosecution indicted Koehberger in mid-May on 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary, and he was arraigned a week later. The prosecution intends to seek the death penalty if Koehberger is convicted. Koehberger, 28, sat next to his public defense team, and if you want to know anything about his trial lawyer, I did do a video on her, so that way you can go check out my video. I'm curious to know why she wanted to represent Koehberger or how it came, so just some things to look at. And then at Friday's hearing, wearing a light blue suit and striped tie, he is accused of stabbing to death 4 Idaho students. We won't go over all of that stuff again because we've been over it several times in my videos. But during the bulk of the expansive 6-hour plus hearing Friday, the defense and prosecution sparred over whether the state should have to hand over all DNA records, right? So they can't drop this as a bomb in trial, used to identify him. Heated at times, the attorneys for the 2 sides pleaded with judge either to rule the documents be released through discovery or issue an order to protect all information about the use of investigative genetic genealogy, a process where detectives build a family tree based on DNA profile to zero in on a subject. Over the objections from the prosecution, judge allowed the defense to call 4 witnesses to testify during the pretrial hearing on the relevance of the newer DNA technique prosecutors have acknowledged the FBI used while assisting state and local police in the 8-week manhunt. The witnesses included 2 IgG experts and a pair of attorneys who is specialized in discovery and IgG. Okay, we won't go over all of this either, but some pretty crazy stuff. Good battle going on right now. What happens if at some point the DNA, aka the glass house that I mentioned, comes tumbling down? Is the prosecution going to be able to make their case to the jury or the judge based off what Koehberger does at the start of trial? Or do you think that it's irrelevant based off of some of the other things that we've seen in the arrest affidavit? So again, I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts? All right, last thing is, and I'll hit this and then we'll move on to Henry Dinkins, but Koehberger's alibi is due next month. So as to the prosecution's ongoing demand that Koehberger submit an alibi if his attorneys plan to put up such a defense at trial. Judge granted them until September 8th. A formal alibi would present proof that he was somewhere other than King Road home at the time of the homicides, including with support such as witnesses. The defense previously sought to avoid filing the information, saying that such evidence may come out at trial. Pressed by prosecutors, Koehberger's defense wrote earlier this month that he was out driving his car alone, as he often did as a matter of habit, overnight from November 12th to November 13th. Okay? We knew that already, and if that's his alibi, so be it. the prosecutor said. Okay? We will accept what the defendant has said. He was driving around with a stipulation that he cannot provide more about it later at trial if the defense team fails to meet the judge's revised deadline. So pretty interesting stuff. Be interesting to see what goes on with Koehberger. So I'm going to leave that there. We will do an update video as the trial starts. I think this is going to be a very interesting trial. I think people are going to be very interested to see it. I didn't pull up anything for Richard Allen, but I will say a lot of stuff going on with Richard Allen, the so-called confessions where, you know, he's talking to his wife, talking to his mom while he's in jail. I'm not sure that those are going to be allowed into court. They could be, for sure. It's happened before in trials. But until we actually hear it in open court, would, again, a jury be partial to that if they heard it or didn't hear it? And really, if you're living under a rock, you haven't heard about the case, the Delphi murders, right? So, you know, that might be another one where Richard Allen just decides, hey, I want to go before the judge. I don't want to go before a jury and my peers. So some things to look at as things are coming up. It'll be very interesting. All right, the last one, and then we'll wrap up. Henry Dinkins. This is a local one to me, right? I live in Iowa. This is in Davenport, Iowa. This was a pretty sad case. You know, back in, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was 2020. A 10-year-old Deja goes over to stay the night at her brother's house, and there is Henry Dinkins, who is a registered sex offender. Okay, Henry Dinkins essentially calls in the next day and says Deja goes missing. Now, he's on trial right now because, you know, through discovery, through investigation, you know, the police feel that he was the one that committed this crime and essentially covered up the murder, right? Now, through the case so far, it's been very interesting. The one piece that was damning to me when I was watching this case, and I haven't watched a lot of it because I've had to work all week, right? But if you go back onto YouTube and you look at WQAD, that's why I pulled it up, you'll see on YouTube even, they do play parts of the case, and when I get a chance at night, I do kind of listen through a little bit of it, right? I haven't listened to the whole case, but I did listen to his son on the stand, who basically said he saw his dad murder Deja, and that he saw his dad with a silver pistol. Now, the defense attorney tries to rip it apart, you know, basically saying, you know, was it a long gun? Was it a pistol? What color was it? You were only 5 feet away. And his son does come back and say, like, how am I supposed to know? But I did see this happen, right? That, to me, was damning evidence. Now, keep in mind, Henry Dinkins does actually request that the trial goes in front of the judge, and the judge is going to make the ultimate decision. And I had to look this up because I didn't understand why he would want to do that. I still don't really know, other than the fact that I think that there's evidence in the trial that they want somebody that's going to be impartial, especially when it comes to like cell phone technology. They didn't find any DNA whatsoever in the car, but they do talk about how Henry Dinkins went and bought bleach right around that same time. But again, you know, I mean, people buy bleach. He bought 2 bottles. They found 1 bottle in the apartment. 1 bottle was missing. But again, you know, like we use bleach today to clean out the washer. You know, my wife ran a bleach cycle in the washer because somebody left a blanket in there overnight. You know what I mean? Like, are we supposed to keep that bottle after? And don't get me wrong, we didn't obviously use a whole bottle, but we're at the end of the bottle, so we're done with that bottle now, and then the new bottle comes in, right? So is that really a smoking gun? It's not. The fact that he's a sex offender definitely would tell me, like, yeah, she probably shouldn't have been there. But again, she was with her brother, right? So keep in mind, we're not ever going to victim shame either, but those are just things that people are thinking about. It's a lot of stuff going on in this one, right? And then they found her over by Comanche or close to Clinton, and, you know, Henry Dinkins disappears and then comes back, calls her in around noon, 1 o'clock that day, and you can see the body cam footage of when they show up. And Like, there's just a lot of stuff going on in the body cam footage. They're not even really helping out the police officer. He's getting frustrated because he's like, what am I supposed to do with the lack of information that you folks are providing right now, right? And he's trying to dig in. He goes into the apartment. He's thinking that she's hiding somewhere in the apartment because a lot of times that's what happens, right? Unfortunately for this one, they end up finding the body later on, and that's not what happens. But in a lot of the cases, and you've seen some of the stats in my previous videos, people go missing and they're usually found within 48 hours, right? I shouldn't say usually, because there's still 650,000 people that go missing every year in the U.S. So I don't want to make it sound like there's very few people that go missing, because there's a lot. But there's a much higher number of that get found, early on, that aren't actually missing. And that's what the police officer was thinking when you look at the body cam footage, right? Henry Dinkins doesn't have a good alibi. We know that. Henry Dinkins acted a little weird when the cops showed up and, was trying to shift blame and that kind of stuff. Does that make him guilty? It doesn't, right? Watching this case, I would say there's not a whole lot that is showing him to be innocent. If I was the jury, which I'm not, if I was the judge, which I'm not, I'd be leaning towards guilty for sure. I wouldn't have seen anything. I think the prosecution's already made their case. The burden of proof does fall on the prosecution, and the defense will say that time and time again. At this point, I think the prosecution has made their case, and they have shown the burden of proof. Now it's up to the defense to, come and rebut some of that stuff, to maybe put doubt in the mind, which is going to be hard to do that with a judge, because the judge is already impartial and the judge understands the law better than anybody. So if you haven't seen this case, again, it's local to Davenport. Check it out. Let me know what you think. What am I missing on this one? What's your perspective? Do you think Henry is guilty, or do you think he's innocent? Do you think it was just coincidence that she was a 10-year-old girl and she was staying at a registered sex offender's place? What are your thoughts on that? Is that coincidence? Could be. Do you think he had something to do with it? At this point, from just what I've seen of the case, and I haven't watched the whole case again, it's been a really busy month at work right now, so I don't get as much time to review, but everything that I've seen is really pointing guilty. So, based off of that was everything that I wanted to cover in the live stream, and I do want to get some feedback, but before we do that, if you're still with me right now, or you've listened to my live stream and you like the information that's on here, I'm going to ask, like everybody else asks, hit that subscribe button. We are trying to get monetized. We're trying to get to 1,000. And then obviously we'll want to continue to grow 10,000, 100,000, so on and so forth. At some point, I would love to make this passion project a full-time job. That being said, we are constantly trying to improve the channel. We are looking at moving some things around. My daughter Lexi, who's 20, is going to be working on the background. So the wall that you see behind me, she's going to try to create a logo. And she's looking to create a logo that has my dogs in it with a microphone, that type of stuff. So that way we'll have our own logo and something that the community can share. So we'll see how that goes. We are going to move the desk a little bit just to let a little bit of the lighting that you can see back here in the window kind of come from behind, so that way you can see a little bit better, and it'll just be a little bit more visual pleasing. I would like to hear from you folks if you like the microphone in the shot or out of the shot, because we can move it either way. I've left it in the shot because I think it gives it just that little bit of podcast look to it, but based off of what you folks want to see, we'll do some stuff with that. We have worked hard at synchronizing, and we'll continue to do that stuff. And then the other thing is, if you like the videos, definitely hit a like on there, and leave some comments. I love when we're small enough right now, I'm able to respond to all the comments. Now, would it be my aspirations one day to get to a point where, we're getting 500, 600, 700 comments per video? Absolutely. Where I won't be able to answer them all, but right now I can do that. I can definitely spend a lot of time with the community. And because I'm only doing 1 or 2 videos a week, I have time to be able to respond, and I like to spend a lot of time on the channel. It takes a while to, record the video, find the content and then cut the video, right? And I'm doing all of that by myself. I don't have any help doing that. One day I'm hoping that we're big enough where we can get an editor and get somebody that can cut the videos, because then I can bring more content to you folks. I can do more live streams and things like that. And then we can, as a community, grow. And my intent behind the community is not just true crime, because we're all passionate about it. And there's some great channels out there, right? The channel I think I've been watching the most right now is Titanium Built. I've watched her since she was pre 1,000 subs, and she just hit 10,000 subs, which is super cool, right? Watching her grow as much, and she works hard. So if you haven't seen Titanium Built, go check it out. I would say probably one of the hardest working folks on YouTube, and it's my understanding she does everything by herself as well. I could be wrong on that, but she's always got shorts going. She's got live streams going. She's got some great videos out there. I started watching pre-Kylie Rodney. So, some really good communities out there. I want to have a community where it's very interactive and we get to see other people's perspectives. Again, I don't always agree with other people's perspectives, but as long as it's respectful, I think it's great to be able to talk through those. And I would say our community has been very respectful, and we've learned to disagree when we disagree, but a lot of good points, and that for me is awesome. The other thing that I've seen is a lot of the subs will reach out and say, hey, I've subbed to your channel. I love that, by the way. If you subbed, like just hitting that sub button does so much for any channel, not just mine, right? It goes a long, long, long ways. So if that's your contribution to the channel, that is a major contribution, right? If you just stumbled upon my channel and you're just watching the video, that is a major contribution to that channel, right? Or to my channel, which is great. If you hit a like, all of those things require you to use energy, and I have to build up that trust and deliver you good enough content for you to do that. So if I do that, please, please, please hit that subscribe, that like, leave a comment. If I don't do that for one reason or another, you can shoot me a message. If you want to shoot it to me directly, you can leave a comment on the video, hit me up on my social medias, whatever. Just let me know how I can improve or how I can get your viewership back, because we definitely want to continue to grow. And we do want to encourage people to participate and be included. So that all being said, my last video, well, I guess it was 2 videos now, but this last week video, we've hit 1.6K views. We are on pace to beat our all-time biggest video, which was 2.5K, which is awesome. And I would love to hear why we're doing good, because some of the other videos that I have, I think, have a little bit better storyline, and some don't. But over time, we're going to continue to improve the content. And if there's stuff you want to see, people have put requests in the comments before. I will definitely try to cover it. I'll do the research if I haven't already, and then release a video. Again, from start to finish, it takes, for each video, probably 10 to 15 hours of work. Sometimes longer. Very rarely is it shorter than that, based off of some of the videos that we're doing. A lot of that's obviously going to be research and watching what other people are doing, and that's all passion stuff. So it doesn't feel like work, but it does take a while. So I can't just continue to put stuff out. I am on vacation in a week, so I'm going to try to put out a video each day then, which should be delayed. You might see it the week after that. So I want to end with this. I do appreciate everybody tuning in, whether it's my videos, whether you're commenting on the channel or you're in the live stream. I do appreciate that it's your time, and I love spending time on this channel. So that being said, again, I'm your host, Tim Sahlberg. I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend, a wonderful Saturday night, and you can check back in on Tuesday or Wednesday, and we will be highlighting the wildfires that happened in Maui and the current wildfires that are happening in Kelowna, and we're going to look to see what types of crimes may have been committed for these wildfires. So stay tuned.